This is the session on April the 7th on Smoothness and Timing. My name is John Kaltenthaler, and I'm the moderator of this program today. Our panelist today is Don Casper, who is from Mannheim area in Germany, which is a club I used to call for back in whatever it was. And Don began dancing in 1978. He began calling in 79. He's a member of European Callers and Teachers Association, and they're trying to get some information about ECTA. When we were over in Germany for 5 years, we had been chairman and training director of ECTA for a number of years, and we thought that was a great organization. Back in those days, there were over 75 clubs in Europe. They didn't used to have it in Czechoslovakia or Russia, but now they do. And interestingly enough, clubs in Europe, in many instances, have the same problems that we have here in the States. But we're going to be talking today about two things, smoothness and timing. Now, there are several handouts in the back that I hope you all have picked up, and I'm not going to try to read them to you, but the one is entitled Smooth Body Flow. I think you should understand that the first element there is, it says timing and tempo. There is a major difference between timing and tempo. Tempo is the speed at which you play the record. Timing has three parts. There's the command time, which is the length of time it takes you to give a command. There's the lead time, which is the time before you expect the action to begin. And then the third part of timing is the execution time. You can vary those, and dancers will indeed vary those, but your job as a caller is to give the timing in such a way that the dancers have the hand available, they have the space available, and the body flow is there because of the direction that you're asking the dancers to turn based upon the call. A second document that we have is called Degree of Difficulty. Let me tell you how that document came about and how you can use it. That document came about by a person by the name of John Sobolski, who is on the board of governors here, who was working for Xerox, and Xerox gave him up to 10% of his time to work on any project, not necessarily related to Xerox. And he chose to write about degree of difficulty, and he categorized the degree of difficulty as you see listed there, and then we added some explanations of those terms on the back of the page to give you in a single location. That you picked up the three documents in the back as your handout before you walk by them again. That didn't make a U-turn back, but it works all right for me. The degree of difficulty is exacerbated if you combine multiple things. If you look at that document, we think that most of them are self-explanatory. However, you'll notice that number 10 says if you compound a couple of them. But let's just quickly take a look at them. If you don't know the call, it's going to be harder to do, isn't it? Yeah, duh, I guess so. If it's a familiar call but infrequently used, why do you suppose we dropped Fan the Top from the mainstream program? Callers weren't using it. Why weren't callers using it? Yeah, you were in Germany, but why weren't other callers using it? Bill Peters, for many years, argued that the best way to do Fan the Top was to swing through, box the net, fan the top. And I said, Bill, that's true, but today's dancers don't face squarely. They don't finish the swing through and box the net, so they are indeed facing, and the center girls are touching hands. I said a better example would be if you did a head square through 4, touch a quarter scoot back, do a single hinge to a fan the top, because the girls are coming together, and their bodies with their trend of motion is going to enable them to turn by the left hand, because that's what they want to do. Let them do it. But if we never call it, it gets dropped from the program list. An unfamiliar formation. You can't call that from there. Well, maybe we can. Maybe it still fits the definition. But if we don't use it, maybe they have a restriction. For instance, in a mainstream call, tag the line. What's the restriction on tag the line? Not tag the line, extend. It can only be called from a quarter tag. That's the only way it can be called at the mainstream program. Anything else is a deviation from the program. It's going outside the list. If you have to remember too much, well, how many of you have ever had a call, you say, what the heck is that part of that? we have to remember whether we're ends, we're centers, we're girls or boys or whatever it happens to be. That shouldn't be a problem for most of us, but sometimes it is. If you have to keep track of too much, if it's predicated upon the ends doing something while the centers do something else, maybe you temporarily forget that you're now an end, but if you traded with somebody, you're now a center. And if you have to keep track of all that, that's going to make the call more difficult. Not that the call itself is inherently difficult, but because it comes so rapidly. Anticipation. We teach the dancers to anticipate, don't we? Forward, up, you, back, and reel, pass through, and bend the line, right? Not hardly. You're going to expect them to, because we've trained them to know that when we rhyme words in calling, and if you heard the Germans dance last night, some of them were doing a great deal of rhyming of words, which made it more difficult for the dancers to pick up on the action. Years ago, we did everything with rhymes. We had names for dancers, Star Crazy, whatever it happened to be. And we did these things, and you've heard Flippo, Big Pig, Little Pig, Root Hog, and Die. I mean, it has nothing to do with the dance action. There's handouts in the back there if you didn't pick them up, sir. 3 of them. You can go back and get them now. Smoothness is lacking. We're going to talk specifically on smoothness later on in the program today. I want you to look at number 9 for just a second, because what is right? If you look at that, if the ending formation feels right, it probably is. How many times have you seen your dancers looking around to see whether they're in the right spot? Yes? If they're in doubt, they'll probably turn around. I had a dancer that we were teaching advanced program to, and she invariably would be facing the wrong way. And I said, turn around, Mary Jane. The 3rd week of advanced lessons, someone said, when are you going to teach that call, Turn Around, Mary Jane? You can laugh, but that's what happens as you're calling sometimes. You never know what's going to react. And if you compound several of these together, then it's going to be more difficult. If you combine an infrequent use or an unfamiliar arrangement, 2 factors together are going to make the call more difficult than if you just added 1. And when we get into the specifics of smoothness, we're going to talk a little bit about how you develop the variety within your choreographic applications so that the dancers can win every time. Is that easy to do? No, it's not. Then I'm going to turn it over to Don, and I want to play one little piece of music first, only because I think music is an important aspect of square dance calling and the activity. As far as I know, it is. I'm going to give it to you. I want to make sure we got this set at the right spot. Here's the part I want you to listen to. Isn't that a nice lilt to the music? You can just watch the dancers. They're absolutely going to move to that because they hear that great piece of music. Now, this particular music is on a Prairie label. It's 2010, and one side is Smooches and the other side is the Mountain March. But I love that hoedown. I've used it for I don't know how many years, literally over 30 years. Smooches on one side and the Mountain March on the other. It's Prairie Record 2010.
The side you were listening to was the Mountain March.
Okay, and to discuss smoothness and timing from perhaps a European perspective, Mr. Don. Come on, what's his name? Casper, of course.
Thank you, John. First of all, I'd like to say it's going back to Ed Foot's keynote speech from Monday morning. Different time zone, forgive me. When he mentioned all this synchronicity, I think it's just wonderful. I mean, I got asked to be on this panel by Gail Swindle. And first I was a little hesitant because I'm from out of country, and I went, gee, why do you want me on a panel? You know, what input can I give? And then I saw who was my moderator, and I said yes. Because, as John mentioned, he was over in Europe way back when, many, many moons ago. And so it's really a privilege for me to work with this gentleman. And I wish some of our club could see this because we called for the same club. He some 40-odd years ago, and me today, so that was great. I'd like to just, before I get into the smoothness, I'd like to make a few comments on this degree of difficulty as well, and how maybe we as callers can influence that Unknown call, if you're calling to your own group, well, obviously I hope you know what you've taught them, what they can do and what they can't. If you're out on a weekend dance and you were hired to do a dance for a club and you don't know these people, as Deborah Carroll Jones said in her session, the first couple of tips, you want to suss the floor. You want to feel out what they can do and what they can't do before you try any experiments with them that will benefit you, that will benefit them, because they see, oh, we can dance to this guy or lady, and you'll get their attention then right away. The keeping track of too much or remembering too much, remember, dancers have to know if they're heads, sides, boys, girls, centers, ends, leaders, trailers. And we see that even when we're dancing. All of a sudden we're in the middle of in a three-quarter tag formation, and the caller says heads, trade, or something like that. And we go, was I ahead or was I aside? I've forgotten because it's been a while since I've been at my home position. Also, we can influence that as a caller when we stack our calls. Yeah, don't do too much of that, especially with newer dancers, because they'll just remember the last part. Or you'll see the look on their face. Got to keep track of 5 calls here. And then they'll run, just to make sure they get done in time before they forget that. Run is a call, but not run in that case as hurry up and get to that position. You do not get a prize for being there first. It is a team effort, as we've always said. And also our anticipation, as we say in number 7 in this, we are guilty if we keep calling the same stuff all the time. And I saw this in Europe quite a bit when we say sides square through 4, split the heads. And they go in between, and they start to separate and come around the ends. And wait a minute, the last call was split the heads. So what did that mean? The sides were now behind the heads, facing out. The heads should have come back together. And that's the end of the formation. Theoretically, trade by is possible there. You can't call it if they've already done their separate and go around. So catch them sometimes. If they're anticipating, but make sure you know why they're anticipating. Maybe you've called the same stuff too much, too often. Okay. I'd like to get into some smoothness now. What is smooth dancing? I mean, you've all been out at dances. At least I hope you still go to other callers' dances, not only to dance yourselves and get that side of the enjoyment, but also to listen to what your peers are doing. Maybe you can get some ideas from them. And support the camaraderie and fellowship that we know is square dancing. What makes a dance fun? Not only because you've accomplished all the calls. I mean, I can go through the whole tip, and it was start and stop, and I've done all the calls, but it wasn't fun because it didn't keep me moving. It didn't keep me active. Or I was too active. I was the one on the end, and I had to do a swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, pass through, touch a quarter, scoot back in, and I was just constantly in motion. So that took some of the smoothness out of it too. The caller rushed the dancers. He didn't give us enough time to execute, as John said. He didn't give us enough lead-in time to catch the call that he wanted us to do. Didn't give us time to execute the call, and he was already 2 calls down the road. Maybe this was because the dancers were rushing, as we've seen sometimes. They still try to get there first. And I keep telling my dancers, you won't get there ahead of me. Yeah? I'm not going to play that game, though. If you're there and you've got nothing to do, it's your fault. Because I'm watching the dancers that are moving in time, and just before they get to the end of that call is when I give them the next call. Not halfway through the call, just in case some people get there early and want to start the next thing. Anyway, so smoothness is something that we as callers definitely have an effect on, because smooth dancing won't come about until there's smooth calling. Right? We have to work on our delivery, giving them the time, giving them or making sure that we call to the beat of the music as well. And the example that John provided us with is great, because most of our music is 4/4 time, and that's what we're used to calling to. And we should try to give the calls in advance, so then when that beat 1 comes in, that's when they start the move. Now some of our calls are a little short. Sometimes we have very short, quick actions with very long names, like pass to the center. So we've got to watch that and make sure we get that call out well enough so the dancers have not stopped before we call pass to the center. Maybe that's why dive through is used more often, even though it tends to be the one with the arch that causes pain for some people. Though they still do the dive through, but they don't do the arch. They don't do the proper handwork. They cut it short, or they might even do the action of pass to the center, not splitting between the two, but rather passing right shoulders and getting to the position. And that leads to calls like pass to the center not being used, so we're back to this familiar call infrequent use situation. Some of the things that can affect smoothness are, the main thing is timing. Is the call given on time? Are the dancers allowed enough time to practice it, to execute it correctly? And is the next call given then in time so as not to make them stop and start again? Some of the things we have to take into consideration are hand availability. That creates smoothness. I mean, square through 4 and then Allemande left would not work because it's 2 lefts in succession for everybody, right? Head square through 4 and then Allemande left, it would be 2 lefts for everybody in succession. How many times have we heard, though, star through and then square through 3? Which is not good, right? And that's why we have calls like slide through. Or if you're in the center and you want to do starting double pass-through position, centers square through 3 and then right and left through or something like that. Not good. Why not left square through 3 in the middle? That gives the right hand free to do a right and left through or a touch a quarter or a swing through or spin the top or whatever you'd like to call there. Yes, I know a lot of singing call records have some bad examples of body flow and smoothness. The classic one that comes to my mind right away is walk and dodge partner trade. Because it may be fine for that walker, but it is certainly not fine, is anything but fine for that dodger. Sliding over, sliding back, or sliding over, turning back. And we need to look at what we are doing choreographically. And where we are, if we're in a crowded space, we may want to do away with rollaways and just do half sachets instead. Because we don't have the room for a nice, smoothly executed rollaway. We are just, it would be just better to do a half sachet. John has in his other handout some things about choreography, and I'm starting to get a dry throat, so I'll turn this back over to John. Maybe you can pick up from there.
Yeah, let's talk specifically on that third reaction for a moment. Certain calls don't lend themselves to smoothness. Walk and dodge is a classic example. If you do a walk and dodge in a partner trade, it may be good for the left-hand dancer who has done the walking. But for the right-hand dancer, that's a problem. Star through and veer left. How many times have you heard that? Is that a good call? Think of the action. What does the action say for the girl? She is to pass through and turn which direction? I can't hear you. She has to turn left. However, having said that it's not a good combination, I can make it very palatable by the way in which I give the commands. If I star through veer left, it's not too much more than a lunge and recover is used in round dancing. Because as the girl goes over, she comes right back. She hears the call. She knows that's what the action is going to be, and you can smooth it out. The one call which is more difficult to smooth out if you're trying to give them a variety of arrangements and formations from which to call is the walk and dodge. Because the action for one is straightforward, the action for the other one is to the right. Most of the time, if I call a plus dance program, the only time I will ever call chase right is following a walk and dodge. Because as the right-hand dancer is moving to their right, the chase right continues that flow around an exaggerated zoom. Now, does that mean that's the only way you can call it? No, but a pass-through and chase right, what is the direction of the right-hand dancer? Straightforward, and then they have to do a U-turn back in that exaggerated zoom. Much better if we can combine that with a walk and dodge, isn't it? That's part of the problem, part of the organization of that developing smoothness. Now, there's a handout which I did not give you, but if you haven't ever used it or you don't have it, write to the office and tell them you want a call analysis sheet. And then do yourself a favor, make 200 copies of it. Punch it in 3-hole paper. Fill out every call you're going to use from every program that you call, whether it's mainstream, basic, plus, challenge, or whatever. And if you know what the call does, what is the definition, where it starts, where it ends, what hands are required, what is the direction of the body flow, then you know what calls go together and work well. We all, as callers, have lists of combinations that don't work. Don't do them. And Don cited, if you square through 3, after you dive through or pass the center and square through 3, to any move which starts for the right hand. Let's talk about the simple explanation of a twirl. How many dancers do we see twirl? When I teach classes, I teach them the only time I want you to twirl is if you hear promenade. Why is that? Does anybody want to try to come up with an answer for that? The only drop, yes? Okay, for the microphone, he says because it puts the lady in a position for forward movement. All of the ladies' actions start to their left. What direction is the lady turning if we twirl the girl? She's turning to the right. So it is a total reversal of direction. When I'm teaching classes, I do not allow even the experienced dancers to twirl. I said, no twirls. And they look at me, and they say, oh, here comes Stick in the Mud again. Well, I'll play that game with them, but they're going to find that it's a more comfortable dance for them because I'm concerned with their safety and their flow. There is an expression which is not yet widely accepted that is called sequential overflow. What is sequential overflow? The right-handed nature of most of our square dance figures and terms. We are moving to the right and we continue in a circular right-handed action. A right and left through is a good undoer of that because as you do that wheel around or courtesy turn, whichever you want to call it, that is an action to the left. So that's not going to be a continuity of right-handed actions. How many of you remember God Bless America when it first came out? Well, it was a couple circulate, a couple straight, and then Ferris wheel. And if you think about the action for the one couple, they're going round and round in smaller concentric circles. And eventually they disappear unto themselves. So that's not a good combination. How could you change it without making it more difficult? Dancers appreciate variety, but they don't necessarily appreciate complexity. Understand, variety, not complexity. Having said that, I will tell you that whenever you change a call from what they consider to be standard, you've made the call more difficult. Maybe not impossibly difficult, but let's assume for sake of discussion that you're going to teach something from the Plus program. We'll call Load the Boat just for kicks. What is the second easiest arrangement to use if you're going to give variety and load the boat? Boy, boy, girl, girl. Girl, girl, boy, boy. What you're saying is you want to do it so that you can have all 4 boys in the middle because at least 2 of the boys would be in the position they consider to be normal. So 50% of the people who have the hard part, the center part of a load the boat, are doing what they consider to be normal. And you only have to worry about those other 50% of the center dancers, and they can possibly get through. But a lot of calls are that way. Dancers say, I don't like to hold hands with a guy. Have anybody ever heard that? If you call swing through and you swing through again, is that variety? Sure. Does it have 2 boys holding hands? Yeah, momentarily. No big deal about that. If I do a single hinge and then call a swing through, that changes the arrangement of the dancers in the ocean wave. Don't call that? Why not? Why is it terrible?
State your name, please.
Yeah.
State mine is Rich Reel from Bay Area. Yeah, the combination right hand, single hinge, and then swing through is double hand use, avoid.
Yeah, when Don talked about hand availability, head square through 4, what is a common call that a great many callers use? Okay, a lot of them will call star through, won't they? Now, if I do a square through 4, right, left, my man's right hand is available. Okay, but the girl has to use her left hand. So that's not available because it's back behind her slightly. The call slide through in technical reality is a star through without hands. And I'll discuss with anybody that you want whether that's true or not. Some people don't think it is, but I will be happy to discuss it after the session is over. Excuse me. There are other calls that we want to look at. Centers in, bend the line. Terrible, terrible flow. Reversal of direction. Center's out. Bend the line. Terrible, terrible action. Peel off. Cast off 3/4. Sometimes you're using a swing through, spin the top, and that may be alternate hands for a while. But supposing you call spin the top first and then call the swing through. Or you say swing through, spin the top, center's trade. What have you done to those center dancers? How many times do you expect them to turn? The definition of overflow that I think has pretty much unanimous approval is anytime you go 360 degrees or more. Now, some people say if it's over 270 degrees. The 3/4 turn is, I don't consider overflow. But if you turn a full turn, marginal, if you turn more than that, it is definitely overflow. Motivate has built-in overflow built into it. There's no question about it. That's from the A1 program, however. Now, one of the things that happens when you define a call, and there's also another problem with Motivate, but that's a separate issue. You get the dancers that have to do a circulate, and the center dancers for the one circulate is a half a turn. And then they have to cast 3/4. Well, a half a turn and a 3/4 turn is how far? 1 1/4, which is overflow. That's part of the definition, and that's what people will accept. I don't argue the point that they accept it, but I think technically it's bad. When we talk about the right-handed two-face line, bend the line, flutter wheel. What's wrong with that? Right-handed two-face line. That's right. If you bend the line, you have to think of the flow of the end dancers as well as the center dancers. From lines facing out, bend the line, flutter wheel. These combinations are bad for at least half of the dancers, but probably it's bad for all of the dancers. And these are the examples we tried to give you. Facing lines, same sexes together, or same sexes facing. If you call a star through, you can't do it because that's a sex-determinate call. If you call a slide through, you can do it, but what is the resulting formation and arrangement after you complete the call? You have girls facing girls, boys facing boys. Well, which hand hold are the girls holding? The girls are holding left hands and the boys are holding right hands. For those of you who are into the program, that happens to be called a magic column. Big deal. How can you get out of it utilizing mainstream terminology? Because you got into it with mainstream terminology. There's got to be a way. What? Your home? No. No. And if we are calling strictly the mainstream program, well, you can do facing in, but that's not exactly smooth flow. Supposing we said trade and a quarter more. Would that be a legitimate mainstream call? Sure, a quarter more is legitimate, isn't it? Because it's directional calling.
Yeah, or trade and face in or something like that. Actually, a way to get out of it would be if the men are on the ends and the ladies are in the center of the formation, you could try something like those facing start, everybody finish right and left through or something like that. For instance,
what would the
nothing wrong with that.
What would be the degree of difficulty on that?
You'd probably have to workshop it first.
Well, but the point being that we're going to compound a couple of things there because it's going to be an unfamiliar formation, which is a magic column. It's going to be an infrequently used call from that formation. Whereas the trade and a quarter more, the trade would make no difference to them, right or left. Yes, Dick? Rich?
Yeah, to me, the quarter more specifically, and as couples call, I believe that trade and a quarter more is illegitimate use, my personal opinion.
Okay. Have you ever used it at a club where the dancers have no trouble in executing it? Okay. If you've never called it, obviously you don't know if it's going to work. I respect your opinion, and I don't say that you're wrong, but if I say right and left through and a quarter more, but that's not necessarily, well, I guess it's an as couples. But that's the way that many people in Europe get them into a two-face line. I've had callers at a caller school where they've had 30 years of calling, and I said, okay, I want you to dance all 6 arrangements of two-face lines. How do I get them to a two-face line? They have no clue. And yet that's not a difficult arrangement to create. Part of that is what we as callers do through our call analysis sheet of knowing what a call does, where it starts, where it ends, what hands are required, how far do they go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That call analysis sheet is something I really encourage everybody to get and to use. From facing lines, if I say touch a quarter, peel off, not really a great call, is it? Granted, it goes to the plus program. Bend the line, flutter wheel, or bend the line, reverse the flutter wheel. You have to think of the action of the flutter wheel with the right-hand dancer versus left-hand dancer and where the bend the line put them. 90% of the time, if you do a bend the line and flutter wheel or reverse flutter wheel, at least two of the four dancers are going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, or lines facing in. It doesn't make any difference. If we did you couldn't do a flutter wheel after lines facing in, touch a quarter. But the point being that you have to understand the flow of the action, and the sequential overflow is a problem that you've got to avoid. There are some strange things that happen in square dancing, and a lot of times we don't pay attention to both the women's part and the man's part. We just don't do it. And when you see the eyeballs kind of glazing over and crossing back and forth, you know who made the mistake. It is you, the caller, who has made that mistake. When we talk about timing to me is the most important single aspect of your calling. Is it easy to time a dance correctly? No. If I asked 100 callers, do you understand timing? I would get probably 100 yeses. And if I listened to those same 100 callers call, I would hear less than 50% who understand timing. And I truly believe that. There are people who say, yeah, I understand timing. But what do? They take the first beat of the music for themselves. Now, the record I played with the Mountain March had a nice lilt to it. It's pretty hard not to call that one with proper timing. But let's think for a moment, what is the tempo at which you play most of your records today with a typical square dance club? They've gotten to be a little bit more senior in age. We can call it geriatric dancing if you'd like. Beg pardon? That's not a tempo. That's an RPM. What's the tempo, Wayne? 128? 126 to 128. They did an experiment up in New England, which I thought was fascinating. They had 6 very well-known, very popular callers who varied their tempo from 115 to 138. You'd think that's going to be an awful lot of variance, wouldn't you? Which figure or which tempo do you think was criticized the most? 115. Why? Too fast. Because the caller used so many words that he was wordy and they were getting confused by the words. Now, I can call it 115. I don't. I can call it 138, but I don't. If the dancers want to be comfortable, somewhere between 126 and 128 is probably a good tempo. But the timing is critical. Let's assume for sake of discussion that you call it 120 beats per second, or per minute. Sorry, guys, I lost my head. I wouldn't. If you're calling it 120 beats per minute, how many seconds is that per beat? 1/2 a second. If you're off by 1 beat, your timing is off. How many really understand that, or you'd like to see an example of that by getting up and dancing? I'll be happy to do it, and I will call it correctly, and I will call it incorrectly, and you can feel the difference. Yes? Can we do it? Can we get a square up there, please? I will only call the mainstream program, guys. Don't panic. Head square through 4. Was the timing right for that? Swing 2. Boys run. Couples circulate. Ladies chain down the line. Star through. Pass through and trade by. Right and left 2. Veer left at the Ferris wheel. Centers right and left 2. Square through till you find your corner. I don't know where she is. Alaman left. Square your sets. Now, was the timing correct on that? What's your comment? Wait. Is he got? Oh yeah. I do timing because I know how long it's supposed to take. I gave the command with the lead time when they needed it based on the location of the dancers.
For the tape, just excuse me, John. The richest question was, could he call that facing the back wall, or is he looking at the dancers to get the timing? And John
the answer to your question is yes, I could. Would I? No. I may, but I would rather just show you the same thing if I miss it by a beat, and what the different feel is for the people who are dancing. Is that a fair thing for you guys? How long is it going to take them to do the square through from a static square? 10 beats. How long is the swing through going to take? 10 and 6 is how much? That's 2 musical phrases. Isn't that nice to know we come out even sometimes on these things? But if I'm off just a little bit, or I take the first beat for myself. Head square through 4. I gave him the first beat anyhow. Swing 2, a little early, wasn't it? Boys run. Couples circulate. Ladies chain down the line. Close there. Star through. Pass through. Trade by. Right or left through. Pass through. Trade by. Right or left through. Pass to the center. Square through. Get me 3. Make it 5. That'll work. Halaman left. Promenade and don't stop. Now it gets a little tougher because we're in the motion. Heads wheel around. Right or left through. Pass through when you wheel and deal. Outside, squeeze in, up to the middle, and come right back. Everybody touch a quarter. Single file, circulate. Boys trade, and a quarter more. Boys square through, you get me 4. Put centers in. Cast off 3 quarters. All the girls are facing the same relative facing. Girls circulate double on the outside track. Boys pass the ocean. Extend. Girls face in. Swing 2. Boys trade. Girls trade. Centers trade. Boys run. Lines walk out. And back. Bend your line. Right and left through. The timing is generally there where they can dance to the music, isn't it? But you felt if I was just a little bit off, it felt different, didn't it? Yeah, I deliberately did that because I clipped the timing. Because I gave you the command before you needed it, and you said, I got to hurry. You feel instinctively that you have to hurry. If you do this in a singing call, and how many of you have the record Wind Beneath My Wings, or I guess it's called My Hero? If you start that with a 4 ladies chain so that the dancer gets the first beat, that's a whole different feel to that record than if you take the first beat for yourself. We did a study again up in New England. One call was John Jones had done it with I Want to See You in My Eyes. And that had about 54 beats of choreography for a 64-beat musical phrase. The other one was Little Old Fashioned Karma on a, the heck was that on? That had 72 beats of choreography for a 64-beat phrase. Yet they both danced pretty well. What was the difference between them and why? John Jones took the first beat of the music for himself, and that makes the call go longer because you don't have the music available for you. The thing about square dancing, and again, just so we don't always play the same music, just flip this over. Square your sets if you would, please. Heads square through 4. Swing 2. Too early, isn't it? Boys run. A little bit late. Couples circulate. That was very late. Ladies chain down the line. Pass through when you wheel and deal. Zoom. Resume. Center square through to get to 3. Do it osado. Make a little wave. Swing 2. Spin your top. A lot of times when you hear a swing 2 spin the top, what do the callers say? Without a stop, which automatically means you're going to miss it. I guarantee you're going to have to come to a stop. Okay? Do a right or left through. Pass the ocean. Swing 2. Spin the top without a stop, the right or left through. The timing has got to be off with it, doesn't it? And you see that, you guys feel it. You want to rush. If I give it too early, you want to say, come on, motor mouth, get that thing going. I want to dance with the music. All right, let's see. Who's your corner? All right. Pass through and bend your line. Circle up 8-8 that way. Circle to the left, go around. Now the ladies center in the men's sachet. And the man left. Dos Sado. Men star by the left. Pick up original partner, star promenade. It's amazing how we can make it work out. Nobody told you to stop. Heads wheel around. Lines up to the middle and back. And a right and left do. I would have tried to get square to a wall, but that's all right. Pass through when you wheel and deal. Get square to a wall there. So it's very easier for you to dance. Double pass through. Put centers in and bend your line. I want the trust concession if you ever call that one. I'm going to give you some bad choreography deliberately. Pass the ocean. Swing two. Scoot back. Boys run around the girl. Pass two when you wheel and deal. Centers pass two. Everybody swing two now. Spin your top. Right to left two. Now if the flow is there, the timing is there, it's not hard to dance. Anything you want to call, I really don't care. Now let's take a look at some overflow conditions. From here, past the ocean. Swing two. Boys run. Couples circulate. Now the couples trade. And your Ferris wheel. Now, you guys see that in the audience, right?
Yeah.
You noticed that, did you, Wayne? Good boy. The point being that a lot of this stuff, we don't always think about it in advance. And we say, oh, darn, I wish I hadn't called that. Well, it happens sometimes, and when it does, we know we made a mistake. Well, you can laugh about it or you can do it inadvertently. Square your sets for just a moment, because there's another one I want to just show that, again, would be a use of a particular call that, let's have 4 ladies chain 3/4 and 4 ladies chain across. And the head step forward and face your corner. No, well, I'm not saying whether it's terrible. I mean, I could get on there a number of different ways. For right now, just step into the wave. Is everybody holding hands with their partner? What is a call that we could call what from here? We could call a reverse right left grand, couldn't we? Wrong way grand, right? But what happens if I say all 8 fold? No, just a second. I don't want you to do it. I just want to say, think about what happens. Is this a familiar call? Maybe. If it's from an unfamiliar arrangement, definitely. But if say everybody fold, what happens? All 8 fold. But they're in a position to do a right and left grand because they have indeed folded in front of that person. Get back where you were before you got where you are.
That's a new call.
It works, guys. Don't knock it. The way I might teach this or workshop it, I would have boys fold, boys unfold, girls fold, girls unfold, everybody fold, right and left grand. By doing it that way, if they've never done an all 8 fold or everybody fold, it was going to work. Is an unfold command or an undo a command that you didn't want to call? Yeah, it works. Is it a gimmick? Probably yes. Is it technically legal? Probably no. If you're a purist, you might want to avoid it. However, as an entertainer, it might be a very good factor of getting them through a difficult call or an unfamiliar arrangement or an unfamiliar formation from which you do something. I do not urge you to change the definition in order to fit something that you want to do. If that's a legitimate call, but it requires a change in definitions, please don't do it. Let's give these dancers one applause. Good. I'm proud of you. A one applause function is a very useful tool when you don't want to waste a lot of time.
On the same lines, if you're doing gimmicks like that, don't overdo them. That can be just as bad. It's all right to add a little spice, but don't make it too spicy or they won't like that.
I have in that one handout sheet on choreography, I have cautions. We frequently misuse a call. How often have you heard boys scoot back? Because they have boys facing in and girls facing out in the Notion wave. What is the correct call? Scoot back. If you want to say go boys, that's fine, but it's just unnecessary I was going to say unnecessary verbal diarrhea, but that's okay.
It's from the Department of Redundancy Department.
Yeah, right. The point being that we cannot say, boys, scoot back, unless you really mean it. How many of you have the record, I got to think of that. No. It was on the Chinook record, and the figure was heads promenade half, and then roll away, which is not a good combination. You have to roll away, heads promenade. And then you had square through four. And then you're going to do-sa-do to a wave. It's the same sex do-sa-do. Now the centers trade, and what's my formation? All the boys are facing in, all the girls are facing out. Just the boys scoot back while the girls trade with each other. Legitimate call? Absolutely.
Did they consider a wave or not?
Yes. I said, I did. I said it's the same sex wave. Boys together, girls together. Then I had centers trade. Just the boys scoot back while the girls trade with each other, which gives you a corner progression. I beg your pardon, Rich?
Well, he was saying you didn't say to a wave. If you didn't go side over, that's all you did. You didn't say to a wave.
I thought I did, but if I didn't, I would bet you most dancers would do it for you, even if they wouldn't do it for me.
You're right.
But technically he's absolutely correct. I should have said to a wave, and perhaps I didn't. You forget when you get to be my age sometimes. Oh, you have no idea how happy that makes me, Tom. You can't make book on that, though, Tommy.
We heard you, John.
Yeah, good. Thank you, guys. All right. There's, in that sheet on smooth dancing, space available. If you're in an 8-chain through formation, if some of you want to call it a box 1-4, I don't care, but it's really an 8-chain through formation. You should never call ladies chain or flutter wheel because there is no space available with which to do the courtesy turn. Same thing is true with a flutter wheel. From an 8-chain through formation, you don't want to do that because there's no physical space in which to do that call. What happens if you call it? Dancers will try to do it, no question about it. But you can't physically do it because of the space limitations. So here we have a new complexity. We have to think of ends and centers. We have to think of boys and girls. We have to think of the action of the call that requires the dancers to move in a certain direction. And then the next call that we give has to give them a legitimate combination which is flowing. Now, the call analysis sheet gives you that ability to analyze every call that you use in every program that you call. Does that mean that you're going to do everything right? No. Does it mean that you're going to do it right more often than not? If you pay attention, the answer is yes. Now, if you have singing calls, probably 90% of the callers can give it so that the dancer gets the first beat of the first opener. What about the rest of the calls in the singing call? Do they give the call when the music tells them to? Do they give the call when the dancers need the call? Or do they give it any way they want as long as they sound good? How many think the callers call so that they sound good? None of you? Reality says, if I'm a singer, I want to sing. Why do dancers get into trouble on Grand Square? Timing, because the number one, they don't want to try to complete it in 32 beats. Number two, they may have been given the command sides, face, Grand Square, so that they get the first beat of the phrase. But more importantly, if they sing the whole chorus line, and that's going to be ending on beat 32, when should they have gotten the call for the next figure? On beats 31 and 32. I'm still singing. So what do? They give a quick series of commands, Allemande and weave. They swallow the words Allemande and weave. And then where are they going to meet the dancers after they've done the weave the ring? Where would their bodies physically be? Halfway around. How long does the promenade take from halfway around the square? 8 beats, but how many beats of music do they have after they've done the 32-beat Grand Square and the Allemande and weave the ring? They got 16. What are they going to do for the other 8 beats? Whatever they want. That's bad calling on our part because we didn't do something correctly. We were doing a session up at CALLERLAB Mini Lab up in New England, and I was working a session on timing with Dick Ledger. And I was calling, and Dick was commenting on when I gave the calls. And we did the grand square, and then I just said circle left. Now, if I want them to circle left and do an Alaman left and come back and promenade, where should the number one couple be in the quadrants 1, 4, 3, 2, 1? Where should the couple be when I call the heads wheel around, Alaman left, come back and promenade? Here's 1, here's 4, here's 3, here's 2. How long is it going to take me to promenade if I'm over here? 4 beats. If I'm over here in the center, 8. If I'm over here, it's going to be 12. If I give the command Alaman and promenade, I'm going to Alaman left over here, and then I'm going to promenade. It's going to take me the right amount of time to get home. Guess what? The dancers don't have extra time. Then I can give the next command on time, and the dancers get the first beat of music. Is that hard to do? Relative. What can help you as a caller to do that correctly? Strongly phrased music. Strongly phrased music. Yes, Rich. Yeah, sure. Can we get A square? It's the same ones or different ones? I don't care which.
I just wanted to square up, and he's going to do it.
Can we get a square up there, guys? Now, I'm going to make another comment on this. This particular record happens to be a singing call, but it's recorded where the tenor instruments are very sharp. So you need to turn the treble down. Sides face grand square. Reverse it now. Go. All circle left. Alaman left. Promenade home. Side square through 4. But I think you saw the idea that they were moving to the music, and it flowed nicely. You guys, as dancers, are to be commended. 2 applause. That's good. Okay.
We preach it enough. Why couldn't we do it on the floor?
It's very hard sometimes. If you're calling I guess that tempo was probably about neighborhood of 124, but it was a comfortable tempo. And if you're moving to the music, it's easy to do the calls, I think. Didn't you feel that way as dancers? And you notice that I waited and I had this sense to shut my mouth while they were doing it, and they didn't have to do anything. Dancers will have a great time if we just stay out of their way. They really will. Now, I don't find timing that difficult. However, I submit to you that most callers don't pay enough attention to their music, or they get some music that they like because it's rock and roll or whatever, and the music doesn't give you a strong phrase, or it doesn't give you a strong melodic pitch where you can have a voice inflection so that you're not Alaman left with the corner 2 and the partner right and a right and left grand and a grand old right and a left. You're the absolute monotone. Or if it's a woman caller, it's an absolute genie tone. I don't really care what you want to call it. But if you don't have inflection, it's not going to be selling the activity. You're not selling yourself. A lot of us don't think of ourselves as salesmen, but the smoothness, the timing, and the tempo will enable the dancers to say, man, I can't believe it's 10 o'clock already. Instead of, this thing's still working? If they hold their watch up to their ear, you know you're in trouble. But if they say it's, yeah, that's true, they yawn. I think that timing, perhaps more than any other single thing, will determine the degree of goodness of a dance. There's another aspect that I would like to just touch briefly upon, and that is momentum or trend of motion. If you call Dixie style, what has to happen to the men who are waiting when they hear heads right and left, or in a line of 4 facing, right and left to ladies lead Dixie style? What do the men have to do? They have to do counter dancing to their right so that they can do the left touch quarter and end up in the center. What happens if they don't move to the right? The girls have to kind of fling them around and hopefully they'll get them into the center. But counter dancing is leaning back on a swing. It's moving to accommodate the positioning of people. If I have the head couples with their opposite ladies on the outside of the square and I call pass to the center, square through 3, what is the absolute body position at the end of the square through 3? Where are the dancers? They'll be facing their partners, their corners. But will they be facing squarely or will they be offset to their lefts? They're going to be offset to the left because that's the absolute body position. If we call Alaman left, which is a very common call, what do all the dancers have to do? Turn a half a turn to the right to do the Alaman left. That's counter dancing. But if I said square through 3, do a do-sa-do, that would be an absolute position. But it would be what? An unfamiliar call from a familiar arrangement, wouldn't it? Infrequently used. So that would be more difficult, even though a do-sa-do is not a difficult call, because you've done it not from where the dancers were expecting it, it makes it the degree of difficulty is greater. That's the kind of thing that I think callers need to learn, and they can only learn that by studying. I don't think it's difficult, but it should be a requirement. Now, you will find callers who are great singers, and they'll look at me and say, you don't have to give the dancers the first beat. I said, no, but if you do, they're going to enjoy the dance more. And I've had some very fine callers who will take issue with me on that. And I said, fine, let's discuss it. Let's dance it, and you give the dancers the first beat, if you can. They can't do it because they've always taken the first beats for themselves. There are some records, and this, I think, happens in caller schools. The new callers will select the hardest music in the world to call to. They'll select a singing call that has not a strong, discernible melodic rather fashion to it. And your job as a caller coach when you're working with them is to take that record and show them how they could call it. And it's not your kind of music. That's a tough call. I know, Tommy, you've done it, and it's not an easy thing to do because you don't like the music. And when you buy records for yourself, how do you select them? Do you listen to the called side? Bad mistake. If you like the music, then listen to the music, read the cheat sheet. Listen to the music, dance the cheat sheet. Listen to the music, call the cheat sheet without the cheat sheet in your hand. Most people really don't need the cheat sheet. Why do callers use it? Yeah, well, I don't think it's Alzheimer's. I think it's called fear, isn't it? I might forget what it is. Security blanket is absolutely true. I had one caller one time, not a caller, he was a dance leader. He always gave us announcements with his hand in his pocket. I told him about it one time. He said, that's my Braille notes. I won't tell you how embarrassed I was. But I was embarrassed. I just thought, well, at caller schools or at our callers council, and a guy's calling and he's got his hand in his pocket, I'll get up and I'll snap my finger at his hand, and he takes his hand out of his pocket for a few minutes. But we have to watch our posture, don't we? If you talk to Arden Hopkin and you talk about the dance posture or calling posture for a caller, the alignment of the ears to the shoulders, to the pelvic area, down over the knee and down to the ankle, should be in line. We worry sometimes that when we try to breathe, we try to expand our upper chest. What should we be doing when we breathe? Right here. It's called the diaphragmatic control muscle. Some of us have greater diaphragmatic control muscles than others. I just thought it was cute. Okay. These are some of the things that I think are terribly, terribly important in the smoothness and timing. You saw the effect of timing on the danceability and the feel that it has. If you've never danced where you get the first beat all the time, see if you can go to a caller that gives you the first beat. and then reflect back on what your reaction was to that dance for the evening. And I think you'll find that you enjoyed it more than you enjoy most dances, because the caller didn't take the first beat for himself. You have a question, Rich?
Yeah, I was just wondering, your other
You want to try just a good time?
Do I want to try some smooth timing? Sure. I don't care. Give me a chicken pucker.
We got that square up there, please?
Can we get a square? Bow to the partner in the corner, 2 heads, move into the middle and back. Square through 4. Do it outside, oh, with it outside 2. Swing through, come a 2 by 2. Boy, run around that girl. You do a Ferris wheel. And the center square through. 3 hands, split the outside 2. Everybody face in. Move up. I didn't say separate. That's all I said was split the outside 2. See, I caught him. That's anticipation. Make lines facing in. Just turn to face in at the moment. I said face in then. Okay? Do the right and left through. Gonna turn that girl. Flutter wheel, go across. Sweep a quarter more. Split the outside 2. Face in. Up to the middle and back. Do the right and left through. Flutter wheel. Go straight across. Now pass the ocean. Recycle here. Touch 1/4. Do a walk and dodge. Boy, trade. Left swing through. Now I lost my place. Center trade. That was overflow. Boy, run to the left. Move up to the middle and then touch 1/4. Circulate. Twice. Boy, run. And a right and left through. Gonna turn that girl. A veer to the left. You do a Ferris wheel. Square to go 4. 4. Partner trade. Pass the ocean. See, this is all this anticipation that we're getting here. Extend. Swing through. Boy, run. And I've forgotten who's with whom. That's all right. Ferris wheel. Pass through. Do an Alaman left. Promenade. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Here's where we can help too when we know what we want them to do. Heads, wheel around. Up to the middle and back, and they're square to the wall. Past the ocean. Swing through. Boy, trade. Boy, run around a girl. Couples circulate. Is everyone with partner? Okay. 0, right? Okay. Bend the line. Circle to the left till you're home.
Yeah, one of the things I want to just see what happens. Alaman left, promenade, and don't stop. Heads wheel around. Right to left through. Circle up 8. Now we do know they're on a sequence, right? Alaman left for the corner. Promenade, but do not stop. Starting with the heads, do a zoom. Promenade back home. Come on, guys. If you think about that zoom, what is the definition of a zoom? The leaders are going to roll out behind one, aren't they? We say starting with the heads, that defines who the leaders are. Do a zoom, and it's a nice way to change the sequence as you're promenading out of sequence. Well, yeah, obviously that's going to be a problem. The other thing I would like to comment, when Don called do a left swing through, sometimes I think it helps if you say left square through with the emphasis on left. It gives the dancers another clue word as to what it is you expect them to do. Now, Tommy just reminded me of a thing that's important to understand. A lot of times dancers will think you're calling fast when you're giving perfect timing because of the number of words that you use. So if you have a problem with sound, if you have a problem with understanding, try to reduce the number of words and just give command words. That's another exercise you can do if you're working with other callers. If you're mentoring callers, say, give me a patter call with just command words, no chorus lines, or a singing call with just command words. It's an exercise that forces you to give the commands when the dancers need them, not when you need them because of the music. Give these dancers another applause. They did a great job again.
if you all have any questions, this would be a good time to start asking for questions from the floor, because we've got like 15 minutes left before we do lunch. And we'll pass the microphone. The mic controls are up here, so don't mess with any switch on the mic. And state your name, please, and where you're from.
Noah Sigmund, Rubicon, Wisconsin. Just had a question when we were talking about walk and dodge, how it's not a real smooth thing to do, what to do after that. And maybe I was just going to ask if you could maybe throw out some ideas for those of us who would like to know what would be a good idea to do after a walk and dodge.
If you're doing a mainstream program, there is one call which is always smooth, and that would be walkers fold. Because their forward action, they're going to fold to their right. Or if you wanted to do it from a formation where you had the girls facing in, and you did a walk and dodge where the girls are the walkers, you could say girls fold. You could direct it by the sex determinant if that was your particular setup. But a walker's folding action will be smooth. Any other action after a walk and dodge for variety is going to be quasi good, but probably going to have some awkwardness. Yes, sir. Bob.
Bob Asp, Rockton, Illinois. I always use a walk and dodge, and then I do that forward and back and that stuff. And then you could go right into a partner trade face back in, correct?
Yeah.
Is that would cut down the flow.
Let's think of the action. If I do a walk and dodge, everybody go forward and back. Are we going to give them 8 beats to do the forward and back?
Should.
I didn't say should we. I said, are we going to? Because the reason I asked the question is, I think a great many callers call forward and back because they don't know what the heck they're going to say next.
Right.
Am I close to
Correct.
being right there?
Correct. Very much so.
And my only question, I guess, would be if I say go forward and back, that dancer has moved to the right. Are they thinking their part of the action is to a forward and back? Or is that probably going to be an unfamiliar call from a familiar formation?
It is an unfamiliar call. It is an unfamiliar call.
Understanding that that's part of the degree of difficulty. That by itself is going to be more difficult than if I did something that was a little bit smoother. And I think that the walker's folding is a smoother type action because it flows where their momentum is taking them.
Would it be for the girls when the sliders slide over? What about the girls doing a U-turn back or something like that? Would that?
Well, there again, because of the Plus program, I like to use that before a chase right because that seems to flow with the continuity of action. If I have a line of 4 facing and I say a right and left 2 in ladies lead Dixie style, where do the men go? They come into the center. What hands are joined? Men's right hands are joined, thank you. Now, what do they want to do next? They want to do something with their right hand. Let them. I don't care whether it's a trade or you can say starting with the right hand, swing through. You know, there's a lot of things you can do, but you don't want to do a ladies lead Dixie style and do a left swing through, do you? Because that's going to be almost overflow, but it's certainly not going to be a smooth action. Rich, you have a question? Tom, please.
Then you can have Tom Miller from Pennsylvania. Something with walk and dodges that you might want to consider is that we get into the habit all the time of always having the boys walk and the girls dodge, and it's okay to reverse that a little bit. It's also to put them into left-handed boxes. Fold is probably one of the best calls to do from a walk and dodge. But we train our dancers walk and dodge and partner trade. And you can almost go to any dance across the country and walk and dodge, and even before you even say anything, they're already starting to do a partner trade. One of the things that I like to do from a left-handed box with the girls walking and the boys dodging, immediately after that would be a wheel around, which flows right nice back into a line of 4 facing into a line. And it's something we always, again, we train our dancers that we teach it this way, is that when we do a wheel around, we always do it from a promenade position. We don't do wheel arounds from trade by or lines of 4 looking out, just because we know that degree of difficulty just went up a number of percent.
Tommy, let me ask you a question on that before we go to Rich. If I put them in a left-handed box and do a walk and dodge, wheel around, I would agree that it's good for 2, the people on the right. But how about the one on the left?
It's good.
Really?
Because
that center dancer walking forward, now they have to go.
Because of the pivoting action that wheel around gives you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a little bit awkward because of the center action coming forward, and then they suddenly have to become the pivot to do the wheel around.
I would think of the courtesy turn would be in the same order.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. until they get to the side. Where a wheel around, everybody's in that. But again, it becomes into a timing issue. If you call from a left-handed boxer for a walk and dodge, and you pause and you call wheel around, it's going to be ugly. It has to be called exactly to the point where it needs to be perfect.
It's like star through, veer left. If I give the command proper timing, it's a lunge and recover. If I do a walk and dodge, wheel around, I agree, 100% is going to be.
But if you
smooth.
pause it, just if you put a little pause in there,
1 second difference is only.
It's going to be really ugly. But
one beat.
if you call it walk and dodge and wheel around all in the same breath, then you'll see the dancers have that success.
And there's something else that does the way that Tommy says to call that, and that is you're increasing the lead time by just a second or two, so that they have time to translate it mentally and say, oh, yeah, I got to wheel around, and that's the pivoting action. And that little bit of extra lead time smooths it out, and that's very true. Yes, Rich?
I had some comments on the walk and dodge also. So the normal walk and dodge, or the boys walking, the girls dodge, I personally care deeply about body flow, and I have no problem whatsoever with a partner trade after walk and dodge. And the reason is because the girl who just dodged over now takes the hand of the boy, and that handhold can then be the support needed to reverse the direction, and that's what actually makes it a nice feel for it.
Would you agree that if I give the timing in advance, that gives them a little extra time to react and probably will smooth it out?
There's lots of things you can do to smooth it out, yes.
But that would be the number one thing that you as a caller could do, would to give that relatively walk and dodge partner trade close enough together that gives them an extra beat of time to think about it, and it's going to smooth it out.
The partner trade. Wayne Jansen, California. The partner trade, even before you end the walk and dodge, you should already issue the partner trade, so they can anticipate what's coming.
Yep. Any other questions?
I was going to finish on that. The boys, I agree. I agree. The boys fold is a great thing after the walk and dodge. Okay, now what do you do? If you touch a quarter, it's not quite waves. They're kind of like offset. Or if you star through, they're kind of, there's that mushy kind of fudgy calling, which as a advanced and challenge type person, I tend to not like that sort of thing in general. One thing I have done after, for example, the boys fold from the normal one, is to say, reach beside you, find somebody, and everybody veer left. And then now you're in same-sex couples circulate, but that's actually quite hard for the dancers. If you simply say veer left, you actually end up in a wave, amazingly enough, even though single veer is not even taught. Another thing you can do, in the standard walk and dodge where the boys walk and the girls dodge. So I'm going to say walk and dodge. Boys step forward. Boys trade. Boys step, got a wave. Now we can do a left swing through. Another thing you can do, same walk and dodge. Boys step forward and back, all wheel around to your left.
Sure. Good comments.
Some ideas.
Any other comments or questions? Yes?
Thank you. Joe Duncan from King George, Virginia. I would caution some of the newer callers, like myself, to remember that we have, as callers, trained the dancers to react to calls that are non-flowing in a flowing manner. Square through 4, star through is one of them. We have used these calls that do not have proper body flow enough so that the dancers know what's coming and adjust without being told to do so.
Excuse me, but would you tell me what's bad with the flow with square through to a slide through action?
Nothing.
I understand you said star through, but that's not a question of flow. That's a question of hand availability.
Yeah.
See, that's in the document. Hand availability is not the same as smoothness. Yeah.
They tend to kind of go together.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with you. What I'm trying to say is we have a document here that talks about hand availability.
Yes.
And we have to understand that a star through and a slide through, there is a boy's part and a girl's part.
Yes.
One requires a hand, one does not. The one that does not require a hand would be the one to avoid the hand availability problem. Okay?
And the point that I'm trying to make is, since we have trained these dancers to do that, when we concentrate on strictly body flow and not take that into account, we place them in an unfamiliar situation.
Yes.
So as long as we keep in mind that we have already trained them to do something, and when we change that, we have to give them just a little bit of time to react to it.
But I don't think that I would.
But I understand what you're saying, John. Yeah,
what I'm trying, my point to you would be not to disagree with you because I think you're correct. But what I would be saying is I don't think that I would try to justify bad habits because that's the way we taught them. I would say change your teaching method and teach them correctly to begin with, and then you don't have to unteach them later on.
That's fine, except for the dancers that we've already taught 35 years ago.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. 65, I'm sorry.
Thank you for including me. Wait, did you have another comment? Okay.
Any more questions?
Any other questions from anybody? If not, I'd like to thank Don Casper for helping me out, guys.
We have one. We have a question. New call. First time attending.
Okay. By all means.
Hello, David DeVera from Maryland. How would this work? You have a square, have the heads promenade 3/4, sides touch a quarter, sides walk and dodge, sides cloverleaf behind the heads.
Sure.
Okay.
Would that be? What would the success rate that you expect with that? If you just call that cold turkey without having workshopped it.
I guess it depends on the dancers.
What would you, as a caller, expect if you called that? No, the point I'm trying to get at, if it's going to be unusual, to somebody it's going to be difficult. If that's what you want to do, and I don't argue the fact that that's a nice combination, I would suggest you probably workshop it first so that they can get the idea of what you want them to do. And then if you call it, I think it would flow very nicely. Good combination.
Okay.
This is the best flow of walk and dodge you can get. From a squared set, heads touch a quarter, walk and dodge, arch, and dive through.
Okay. Or
Another thing that's
better than the arch, pass to the center.
No, it's bad.
Why?
It has to be a dive through because that girl is dodging to the right, and you want her to go out around the other. So the dive through is the correct motion. And another thing that's good about that is that after walk and dodge, the hard part of it is having everybody face out. But if you have the centers touch a quarter and walk and dodge, there's somebody to look at right there that they know.
Good point. Incidentally, how many of you understand the reasoning why most callers don't use pass to the center? It's the lack of discipline. They are so used to giving dive through in 2 beats that they have not trained themselves to give pass to the center as a 2-beat call. I wish we would change the definition of dive through to be the pass to the center action. There is nothing that I can do. Yeah, well, that's good. But I think that we need to discipline ourselves as callers to use correct terminology. It's like saying boys scoot back when we mean scoot back, the boys go in. Big difference. Or center zoom is another case in point. Yeah, you can have just the end scoot back or end zoom. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, you're modifying the call, but what is the definition of scoot back? What's the starting formation for scoot back? No. The starting formation.
Box circulate.
Does it not say from boxes of 4 or something like that from alternate facing dancers? I would question, I guess. I don't think you can legitimately call scoot back from lines of 4. I don't think that's a scoot back. I can have boys turn too. Okay. Anyhow, thank you, Don Casper. Thank you all for coming. We hope you've had a good time. Enjoy the rest of the convention.
And thank you, Mr. John Kaltenthaler. Everybody enjoy your lunch and enjoy the rest of the convention.